The group began as 6 students of approximately the same age, and I think it's fair to say that if they weren't friends outside the choir of King's College Chapel, that they probably wouldn't have got together.
The group was founded there in 1968, and at the time it was very groundbreaking because there weren't really any other groups, certainly in England, who did this sort of music to that sort of level.
It's very important for us to believe that when a person joins the group, that that person will be easier to get on with.
This is going to turn into a unique recording. Very, very unique. Very unique. So
we spend more time as a group than we do with our wives and our girlfriends.
100 concerts is half the year away from home, half the year out of the UK, half a year living with 5 other guys.
hello, Nicole. Very nice to meet you.
Smile. Smile.
It was at 10. That was. You were
We certainly get on very well together, and we certainly have a good laugh together. And I think that's reflected in the music making.
If you're not good friends, I think it's easy to see that in a concert scenario, or indeed in a recording scenario. If you're not getting on with each other, then everything is at least 10 times harder.
We are a touring group. We perform around about 100 concerts in a year, and so that takes us to a lot of interesting places.
We tour about 6 months of the year. We're very popular in Germany, particularly. We now do 30 to 40 shows there a year, and they're nearly always sold out, so that's great. And Italy as well, popular, France, and in America as well. And we've just been in Taiwan and Japan. We haven't visited those countries for about 5 years. So there was some rebuilding to do in terms of the audience. And in that respect, it was a very successful tour. We had good audiences. People remembered us, which is great. And it's always good to take your own brand of music to another part of the world.
When I think about the sort of people we perform to in those territories, they're incredibly enthusiastic, particularly in Taiwan, where for some reason we're like pop stars. We're not used to being screamed at by young ladies. And that happens to us in Taiwan. It all gets a bit too much sometimes, and when you get to the last show on tour and people are doing funny faces behind the camera itself, then it just gets too much and you decide to do an impression of a dog instead.
The only way you can stay sane if you're in a foreign country and you're doing concerts night after night and you've got a bit of jet lag is by mucking about a bit. And if you get 6 blokes together anywhere in the world, I think you get a little bit of laddish behaviour here and there. It's just it helps to make the job incredibly enjoyable and a lot of fun. And I think it's a good bunch of people at the moment, and we have a really good time.
Dicendo liberta Alleluia.
This is just choir one we're doing now,
Yeah,
right?
it is, isn't it? So it's just choir one. We're just going to go to part
25.
25. Exactly so.
Okay.
We're recording Spem in Alium by Thomas Tallis, a piece with 8 choirs and 40 parts.
It's a very special piece because it's the largest scale choral work that came out of England, certainly in the Renaissance period, and very few works have managed to emulate this sort of scale even nowadays.
I mean, it's just bizarre, basically. I mean, it really is. 40 parts.
Spem in Alium means I've never put my hope or my trust in anyone else than you. It's a clear reference to, a cry to God, really.
Tallis lived from 1505 to 1585, so the piece dates from the middle of the 16th century. As to why it was written, nobody knows.
Probably the most successful suggestion is that it was inspired by a visit to the UK, well, England at the time, by the Italian composer Striggio,
Striger wrote a piece called Ecce Beatem Lucem.
And I think a bit of English pride said, OK, if the Italians can do this, we should do it as well.
And I think just given the pure fact that people often sing or record Spem and Allium and no one really knows too much about Ecce Beatem Lucem, I think you could say that Tallis sort of won the battle.
It's Thomas Tallis's 500th birth year anniversary in 2005, and what better a way to celebrate his anniversary than by doing his masterpiece in a new way. The six of us sing together the whole time. We know each other very well. When we're on tour, we live and breathe our music together. Why not take that home, go to a recording studio, and see what we can do with a fantastic piece of music and do something new.
Johann Sebastian Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, Johann Sebastian, Johann Sebastian Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, Johann Sebastian, Johann Sebastian Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, Johann Johann Christian Tempel, Johann Wilhelm Friedmann, Johann Sebastian Johann Christian, Johann Sebastian, Wilhelm Friedmann, Johann Sebastian, Karl Philipp Grazie. Sforzando, subito piano, agitato, appassionato. Sforzando, Ludwig, agitato, appassionato. Sforzando, Ludwig, agitato, appassionato. Sforzando, Ludwig, agitato, Ludwig, sforzando, Ludwig, agitato, Ludwig, il fuoco. Beethoven. Beethoven. Die Fledermaus, the gypsy gun, the rundum, the Kaiser waltz and the dam. Accellerano forze volcans operettas restorativa circola die Fledermaus accellerano vivace con moto prestissimo amen to the waltzes of your Handschlag. La mer Monsieur Debussy, Monsieur Debussy, Monsieur Debussy,
In any competitive commercial market, you've got to be pushing out the boundaries all the time. You've got to be trying stuff that's new. You've got to be doing things that no one else is doing. And for that reason, I think we're doing the right thing in attempting Spem and Allium.
It's a big thing for us because the King's Singers obviously only have 6 members, and instead of getting another 34 people in to make up the other parts, we're doing it all ourselves.
With it being in 40 parts, and with there being only 6 King's Singers, we have a sort of fundamental problem.
6 into 40 doesn't go terribly well. So that was part of the challenge for us. It was a case of sitting down and deciding who should sing what part and when.
This is why we're in a studio using all the technology available to create basically a template where we can sing on top of ourselves, if you like, overdub to create all the extra 34 parts.
The voice parts will be distributed in such a way that no one person will be singing the top part all the time or the bottom part all the time.
The last thing you want really is to draw attention to the fact that there are only 6 of us singing by having the same melody, the same sort of tune being sung by the same guy, only a couple of beats apart. So we had to go through with a very fine tooth comb and work out that if I was singing a tune in one bar, Philip, the other baritone, would sing the same melody when it reappeared a couple of bars later, just to give the illusion that there were in fact more than 6 of us singing the same piece.
Honest with you, when we get to the end, it might be dreadful. It might sound horrible. I'm hoping not, because it's going to take a long time to do this.
You are driving me crazy. I'm in love, but I'm lazy. So won't you please come home? Oh, honey pie, my position is tragic. Come and show me the magic of your Hollywood song. Wow, wow, wow. You became a legend of the silver screen. And now the thought of meeting you makes me weak in the knees. Oh, honey pie, you are driving me frantic. Sail across the Atlantic to be where you belong. Sail across the Atlantic to be where you belong.
Come back to me, honey
pie. Oh, honey pie, you're gonna drive me crazy. Honey pie, you're gonna drive me crazy. I'm in love, but I'm lazy. So won't you please come home? Come home, oh honey pie. My position is tragic. Come and show me the magic of your Hollywood song.
You became a legend of the silver screen, and now the thought of meeting you makes me weak and
Sail across the Atlantic to be where you belong. Honey, come back to me.
You're singing completely different individual parts and they're interweaving, and you might hear yourself come in on a lead and then you'll hear yourself again a few bars later, and that's a completely unique experience, and I don't think it's been done before. We had, in effect, to work out a map going from beginning to end of the piece so that we'd have a template to which we could work in terms of tempo and pitch, and then which the recording team could use to piece together all the different takes like a jigsaw puzzle. And ultimately, we hope, all the layers will just build up and come together one on top of the other. Choir singing at once. I don't know if you can see this part of the score, Robin, but it's on there. But it's just enormous. You know, you've got all 8 choirs, 40 voices singing at once, and obviously there's going to be, 5 or 6 of each of us, if not in some cases 8, coming through.
As soon as we've recorded a certain number of bars, the next group of singers, as it were, that come on to the recording need to be exactly in time with them. So we have one of the tracks on the board does it does that in your headphones. So you know exactly where you are in the piece, and you're able to sing with the voices that have already been recorded. 7, 8, 9, 10.
There's no way we could sing in the same tempo for 8 different choirs without that guide.
We've got to a point, to an understanding of the piece. We look at the lines properly, and this click is just helping us, rather than we're not being the slave to it. It's just helping us along. And when it's all stuck together, I think it will come together properly. When we started to record it, the music immediately came shining through, and it's fantastic music. We're all having a great time, just luxuriating in these slow-moving harmony and just loving the arpeggio lines, and we're having a great time.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise.
We think we've got a way where we can record it and slightly, almost put a slightly different hat on when we're in a different choir. So almost singing slightly different.
With the human voice, you can go from a very soft whisper to a very harsh sound.
Spare me in alium. And then you can create a complete contrast to that by singing Spare me in alium. And there's much more breath in that sound, there's much less edge to the sound.
If I'm going to speak like this, whether I'm going to speak like this, it's the same. It's the same as an actor would use his vocal colours. It's not just loud and soft.
We might use a very breathy quality, rather like pop singers would do, as if we're close to a microphone. And at other times we would go flat out, you know, as if we were singing Messiah or something like that. And in between those extremes, there's all sorts of other, as we call them, colours. And it can almost sound like two people singing.
Performances of this piece normally have mistakes in them because it's impossible to coordinate 40 singers. Inevitably, you're going to be able to sit there and say, oh, look, you can hear 7 Phils and, 5 Chris's, and, oh, look, there's another 11 Steves going along. And, that is going to be weird in some ways. But in other ways, perhaps, actually, the performance will sound more coordinated than some of them do. But obviously, some purists will not like the concept of it.
We're singing a piece that was written for, of course, for probably at the time boys, but today is sung by women, and it's pretty high set.
There's a soprano part, so it's a little bit too high, even for David, who is our top countertenor, who can sing phenomenally high. And we solved that by putting the whole piece down one tone. There are occasions where I'm singing the top soprano part. The danger is that it might sound just a little bit like a multi-tracking piece. So by introducing my voice up to the top, it sort of spreads the load, and it relaxes the ear a little bit to have some other kind of sound going on.
If we all sang at the same volume, inevitably the higher voices would predominate in an acoustic. And so you have to try and find a foundation that gives an equal balance between the voices.
The sound is like a pyramid. The bottom block, if that's in place, the next one fits on top, and David's is on the top. It's like a Christmas tree. We sometimes refer to it like a Christmas tree with the fairy sat on the top. But he doesn't like that.
The unfortunate part of the Christmas tree analogy is, you know, that when my colleagues talk about it, speaking as the person who sings the top part, they then say, well, of course you have the fairy on the top of the Christmas tree. And I like to point out that I have a star on the top of mine.
Seaside, whenever you stroll along with me, I merely contemplate what you feel inside. Meanwhile, I ask you to be my Clementine. You say you would if you could, but you can't. Oh, I love you, Maggie. Let my imagination run away with you gladly. Brand new angle, a highly commendable seaside rendezvous. I feel so romantic. Can we do it again? Can we do it again? Sometime. I like fantastic. C'est la vie, mesdames et messieurs. Mesdames et messieurs. And at the peak of the season, the Mediterranean. This time of year, it's so fashionable. I feel like dancing. Can I have a volunteer? Just keep right on dancing. What a damn jolly good idea. Jolly good idea. It's such a jollification, as a matter of fact. So très charmant, my dear. Oh, beneath the moonlight, together we sail across the sea. Reminiscing every night. Meanwhile, I ask you to be my Valentine. You say you'd have to tell your daddy. You'd have to tell your daddy. You'd have to tell your daddy. If you can, I'll be your Valentino. We'll ride upon an omnibus and then the casino. Get a new facial, start a sensational seaside rendezvous. So adorable, seaside rendezvous. Ooh, a seaside rendezvous. Give us a kiss. To close your eyes and save these questions for another day. promised I would never leave you, and you should always know, wherever you may go, no matter where you are, I never will be far away. Good night, my angel, now it's time to sleep, and still so many things I want to say. Remember all the songs you sang for me when we went sailing on an emerald bay, and like a boat out on the ocean, I'm rocking you to sleep. The water's dark and deep inside this ancient heart. You'll always be a part of me. Da 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 Good night, my angel, now it's time to dream, and dream how wonderful your life will be. Someday your child may cry, and if you sing this lullaby, then in your heart there will always be a part of Someday we'll all be gone, but lullabies go on and on. They never die, that's how you and I will be.
This process is happening, it's a creative process happening here and now. And for instance, there was one point where we hadn't really thought about it. There's the word creator.
We are in England are very lazy about the way we use our consonants, but obviously the Italians, it would be much more creator with a nice rolled R at the end. And in a way, you don't want to ignore the R, but you don't want to make it sound sort of weird and too Italianate.
Creator, cieli et terre, creator.
The other thing I am hearing is a really quite ugly R on the end of creator.
That's what I heard.
Could it not be quite so sort of vocalised?
What overlaps it?
Without actually sounding anything on the R, but without...
It's more of a philosophical point, I think. So they agree on it.
I mean, if it was Latin,
so they all should do the same, whatever.
But it's a good example of, we listen to each other and we hear these things and we sort of, there's then is a rather long-winded discussion as we try to decide what it is we're actually going to do.
If you all do different things, then that'd be great across 40 parts, because it'll sound as if you're You're being completely inconsistent with 40 singers, which would be perfect.
Well, then it won't sound like you're doing it to a click.
Isn't a single? If it's going to be a little arch, doesn't it just need to be a single? Chord?
Yeah.
When everybody's tired, it can take a longer time to decide. We have no musical director, you see, so it's 6 musical directors.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses falling. 'Tis you must go and I must bide. But come back when summer's in the meadow. Oh, when the valley's hushed and white with snow, 'tis I'll be in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. But when ye come and all the flowers are dying, if I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me, and I shall hear though soft your tread above me, and all my grave will warmer, sweeter be, for you will bend and tell me that you love me, and I shall sleep in peace until you come to me.
The strange thing about this piece is because it's written in 8 choirs, it's not meant to be sung as individual choirs. It's obviously supposed to be performed all together. And it feels very disjointed just singing choir 1 for 10 bars and then just singing choir 2 for 10 bars, because you might not have any form of melody in any of those parts that you're singing. And it sounds ridiculous. It sounds as though lots of bits and pieces are just missing.
Every now and again, the producer puts all these choirs together for us and plays them through the loudspeakers, and it really sounds quite magnificent.
So this is where we're into the right tonality.
When the bass comes in, of course. We just heard a special bit, just one little phrase, and it was magic. But having said that, the rest of it might be dreadful.
We're coming towards the end of it now. It is a little bit tiring on the voices because, after all, we're being asked to record 8 choirs. It's about 80 minutes worth of music. So it is tiring, but as we've come on through the work, it's really getting under our skin, I think, and it's fantastic to see how Tallis put everything together.
At the beginning, which is probably some 30 odd hours ago now, I felt slightly lacking in confidence in our ability to pull this off and to make it sound really impressive. Now that I've heard 8 choirs singing together and our voices majestically sweeping through the piece, I'm very excited.